Internet, it's Katie. I've seen a lot of posts, mostly of the Tumblr variety, in the last couple years about ghosts, and more particularly about the people, the students who fought at the Battle of Hogwarts, coming back as ghosts. Now I want to talk a little bit about that. I'll start with what we know for sure about ghosts. The first thing that we know is that after death, there is some sort of life. We know this for a couple of reasons, partly because Harry does hear the voices whispering behind the veil, and so does Luna, the veil representing the veil between life and death. So there are people on the other side, and Luna, at least, is absolutely certain that we'll see those people again. We also know that there's some kind of life after death because Nearly Headless Nick, when he's talking to Harry about Sirius, refers to Sirius going on. He will have gone on, he says. So if he's going on, he has to go on to somewhere, right? There's somewhere that he's going. Another evidence for there being some sort of life after death is when Harry dies, how he goes to King's Cross. And Dumbledore tells him that he is at a sort of crossroads where he can choose to go back or he can choose to go on. Again, obviously on to somewhere. He can't go on to nowhere. Finally, when Harry and other characters use the Resurrection Stone, it's not whispers of the people the way it is when Priory Incantatem happens. It's those people's actual spirits coming back, being pulled back from wherever they're supposed to be. That's why they don't want to stay, because that's not where they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be somewhere else. So there's some kind of heaven or something after you die. The other thing that we know is that being a ghost seems to be a permanent state of affair. You can't not be a ghost. The reason I think we know this is because Nick is, when he's talking to Harry about Sirius, is very unhappy with still being a ghost. He has finally accepted his death, and he is ready to move on, but he can't. Another evidence for that is Myrtle. She stays behind in order to haunt Olive Hornsby about her death. Even after she cannot haunt Olive Hornsby anymore, she remains a ghost. She doesn't pop out of her existence when her purpose is over. So it seems like if you choose to become a ghost, you never get to move on to whatever is next. The last thing we seem to know is that people who become ghosts either because they aren't ready for death, they're not reconciled with death, or they have some kind of unfinished business in this world that they're not willing to let go. The people who become ghosts are people who are not ready to let go of the world, and so they stay behind in it, but as a shadow of who they used to be. A ghost is literally almost a shadow. They can't touch. You can only see them. They just move through life the way shadows do. So that's what we know. My personal speculation is that whatever there is after, I'm going to go ahead and call it heaven, must be a nice place, because the people in the resurrection stones who are brought back with the resurrection stone want to go back there. So it must be a much better place than Earth is. And also, I also think that living forever the way a ghost does is probably not a very satisfying existence. Now, I'm not just drawing my evidence of that from Harry Potter. The evidence from Harry Potter would, again, mostly come from Nick, who is unhappy to be a ghost still and wants to go on. I'm also drawing from other books. Typically, books about immortality stress that the immortals are envious of our mortality. They're envious of our ability not only to die, but how our ability to die makes the moments when we're living so much more sweet. It makes our lives more passionate and more exciting and happier and more full of love. Books like that would include, a good example is the book about the Tucks, Tuck Everlasting. He doesn't want to continue to live. Another good example of a book like that would be The Silmarillion. which is like the prequel to Lord of the Rings, and the elves are envious of humans' mortality, and that's they are jealous of our ability to die. So all that being said, to say that I don't think that very many students who fought at the Battle of Hogwarts would have stayed behind as ghosts. A big part of the reason I think that is because any kind of person who is ready to fight in a life or death battle against the Dark Lord that they don't think that they can possibly win is obviously not holding hard and fast to their mortality, and they're going to be ready to move on. Another big part of my argument here that those characters wouldn't have stayed behind as ghosts is I don't want them to. It sounds like a pretty miserable way to live, and I don't want my favorite characters to be miserable. I want Fred to have a happily ever after in heaven where he and George get to be together forever. And, you know, maybe he has to wait for him for a little while, but when they're both there, it's like a happily ever after. And I don't think, obviously you can tell I particularly recently saw one about Fred. I don't think that Fred's love for George would be enough to tie him to Earth. And I don't think that George would have wanted him to. I think George would have wanted Fred to go on, and I think Fred would have wanted to go on himself. Fred and George have a history of laughing at danger. Like Simba, ha 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 ha. They have a history of laughing at danger because they're not scared of death. And so I don't think that either of them would have stayed behind. I don't think Colin Creevy would have stayed behind. Lupin, we know, didn't stay behind because the Resurrection Stone brings him back, and Tonks definitely would have gone with Lupin, even though her son was behind again. She loves her son so much, she wants to spend forever with him, not just be able to haunt him while he's alive. You know, I think that this idea that we want our favorite characters to stay behind as ghosts is this bizarre love for immortality and forever, which is, I think, the same reason we like vampire novels so much. We like the idea that our love lasts forever, or that our passions last forever. But when it really comes down to it, guys, I don't think forever is that great of a thing. On Earth, anyway. Because forever, Earth is not a great place, and spending forever here would not be a great experience. What do you think? Would you want to stay on Earth forever? Would you stay behind as a ghost? Do you think any characters who died in the books would have wanted to stay behind as ghosts? Let me know in the comments. Bye, guys.